I knew something was off long before that night, but I kept telling myself it was just a phase. You know, when you're sitting across the table from someone you love, someone you've shared years with, and suddenly it feels like you're strangers? That was me, Thursday night, 8:12 p.m., sitting across from my wife at the same oak dining table we bought together 6 years ago. I was trying to hold on to something that clearly didn't want to be held anymore. The food was warm: salmon, rice, and roasted vegetables. I cooked it myself. I always cooked on Thursdays. She used to love that about me. Used to smile, sit on the kitchen counter, and say I looked sexy in an apron. But tonight, she didn't even look at the plate. She just scrolled on her phone, screen lighting up her face like a cold flashlight in the dark. She hadn't said a word since we sat down. I cleared my throat gently and said, "You had a long day? Just try to start something. Anything." She didn't even look up. She mumbled, still thumbing through whatever held her interest more than me. There was something in her eyes, blank, distant, not angry, just gone, like she was already in another life, and I was just a ghost still haunting the house. I tried again, more gently this time. "Everything all right?" Finally, she put her phone down, but not to engage. She pushed the food with her fork like it offended her, sighed, and said, "I'm just tired, okay?" No eye contact, no affection, just that short tone that hits harder than yelling because it comes with apathy. I tried to lighten the mood. I reached across the table, slow, cautious, like I was touching something fragile, and placed my hand on hers. That's when it happened. She jerked her hand back so fast, you'd think I burned her. "Don't," she snapped. I froze. She looked up then, just for a second, and her eyes, they weren't soft. They were cold, flat like glass. "Don't touch me tonight," she said, barely above a whisper, like she didn't even want the words to exist in the air between us. I didn't say anything. I didn't react. I just nodded and kept eating like her words weren't stabbing holes in my chest. But inside, something cracked. It wasn't just the rejection. It was the confirmation. I'd felt it for months. The distance. The way she stopped kissing me in the morning. The way she turned her body to the edge of the bed. The way every conversation became a checklist, not a connection. And now, she couldn't even stand to be touched. It's humiliating. When your own wife recoils at your hand like it's some burden she has to dodge. After dinner, she went to the bedroom. Didn't even look at me when she walked past. I sat at that table for a long time, just staring at the empty chair across from me. I felt like a fool, like a man who kept showing up to a love that had clocked out a long time ago. I got up, washed the dishes in silence. She didn't say goodnight, didn't ask about my day, didn't care, and I couldn't sleep. So I left the house. It was almost midnight, and I just walked. No direction, just a neighborhood. Quiet streets, flickering street lamps, the smell of cold pavement and distant fireplaces. I passed the house with the porch swing where we used to sit in the early days, back when she used to lean on my shoulder and talk about everything and nothing. I remember her laugh echoing down the street. Now, I couldn't even remember the last time I heard her laugh. At least not with me. I walked past the cafe where we had our first fight and made up 2 hours later with kisses and apologies. Back then, she used to fight for us. Now she won't even talk. And as I walked, all those memories played in my mind like a sad slideshow. She used to wait for me by the door after work. Now she's in bed before I even take my shoes off. She used to kiss the side of my neck after dinner, play with my fingers, tell me I smelled good. Now she winces if I brush her arm. She used to whisper, "I love you," with that softness in her voice that made you believe you were the only man on earth. Now the only thing she whispered was, "Don't touch me tonight." And that whisper echoed louder than any scream. I think that night on those cold sidewalks under dim lights, I stopped being her husband. Not legally, but emotionally. Something inside me closed. Not out of anger, but out of sheer exhaustion. I was tired of begging for crumbs of connection. Tired of pretending this marriage was anything more than a polite arrangement. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stopped hoping. And that's worse, because hope keeps a man trying. But when hope dies, when you know the woman sleeping next to you would rather be anywhere else, you stop fighting. You start preparing your exit in silence. When I finally walked back home, the house felt colder than the outside air. She was already asleep, or pretending to be. I stood in the doorway for a minute, watching her back turn to me. Her hair tied up, her breathing shallow. No space made for me. No sense that I even existed to her anymore. I climbed into bed without a word, facing the other way. And in my head, I whisper my own goodbye. Not out loud, not with drama, but a quiet vow to myself. This is the last night I beg for love. Tomorrow, I disappear. I didn't sleep much that night. I just lay there, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence between us. It was the kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels like being buried alive next to someone who doesn't even notice you're gasping for air. At some point, maybe around 4:30 in the morning, I got out of bed. Quietly, carefully, like I was trying not to wake a stranger. I stood there for a moment at the foot of the bed, just looking at her. She was curled up facing the wall, wrapped in her favorite blanket, the one I got her for our 3rd anniversary. She looked peaceful, like nothing was wrong. Like she didn't just push her husband 1 inch further off the edge of the cliff the night before. And I realized something right then. It wasn't just that our marriage was over. It was that the version of her I loved, the version that smiled when I walked through the door, the one who danced with me barefoot in the kitchen, the one who used to tell me I made her feel safe, that woman didn't exist anymore. Maybe she changed. Maybe I did. Maybe life just wore us both down. I don't know. But whatever this was, it wasn't love. Not anymore. And I wasn't angry. That's the strangest part. I didn't feel rage or betrayal. I felt something else. Something colder, but also clearer. Relief. It was a sad kind of liberation, like taking off a heavy coat you didn't know you were wearing for years. I walked over to the closet, opened the drawer, and pulled out a small duffel bag I hadn't used since our last trip to the lake, back when we still touched each other without it feeling forced. I packed it slow, quiet. A few shirts, a pair of jeans, my toothbrush, phone charger, wallet, passport, just the essentials. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I was calm, more calm than I'd been in months. I walked into the kitchen and sat at the table, the same one where she pulled her hand away from me the night before. The same table where I used to make her laugh while we had coffee. The same table that now felt colder than steel. I grabbed a sticky note from the drawer, wrote 4 simple words. Take care of yourself. That was it. No goodbye. No dramatic closure. No begging. Just finality. I set the note down where I knew she'd find it. Then I took one last look at the house. Every picture on the wall felt like a lie. Smiling faces frozen in time, pretending love never fades. I thought about grabbing the framed photo of our wedding, but I didn't. I just stared at it for a second and walked out. The sun hadn't even started to rise yet. The world was quiet, still asleep, and I walked away from the life I built with her, with nothing but a small bag and a worn-out soul. I didn't really know where I was going. I just drove. No music, no destination, just silence and road. At one point, I parked in front of 24-Hour Diner. I sat in the lot and stared at the steering wheel for what felt like an hour. Then I turned the car back on and kept driving. Eventually, I checked into a cheap roadside motel on the outskirts of town. $42 a night. It smelled like mildew and bad decisions, but the guy at the desk didn't ask questions. That was good enough for me. The room had one lamp, one chair, and a bed that creaked if you breathed too hard. I dropped my bag on the floor, sat on the edge of the bed, and just breathed. I felt hollow, empty, but not broken. It's strange. I always thought leaving would be this massive, dramatic thing, that it would hurt so much I'd crumble, that I'd feel guilt or doubt or longing. But I didn't. What I felt was peace. Not the kind of peace you feel when things are perfect, but the kind of peace you feel when you finally stop lying to yourself. I wasn't happy, but I was honest. And sometimes that's the first real step towards something better. That day, I didn't return calls. I didn't check messages. I just turned my phone off and let the world spin without me. I sat in that motel room, stared at the ceiling, drank burnt coffee from the vending machine, and thought about everything I gave to that woman. The emotional labor, the patience, the little sacrifices, the money, the nights I stayed up listening to her fears, the years I carried us both when she didn't want to carry anything. And I realized she wasn't the villain in my story, but I wasn't going to be the victim anymore either. Later that night, I drove to my friend Eric's place. He had a detached garage he used as a workshop. I didn't want to explain everything, so I just said, "Mind if I crash here for a few nights?" He looked at me for a second, like he knew. Like the look on my face said more than words ever could. And he nodded. Mi casa, man. You already know. I threw my bag on the floor, laid down on an old sofa covered in paint stains, and for the first time in a long time, I actually slept. No nightmares. No tossing. No waking up to silence and a woman who wished I wasn't there. Just sleep. I didn't have a plan. No apartment lined up. No next move. Just a small bag, a worn heart, and a quiet decision to rebuild. But for the first time in years, I felt like a man again. Not because I left her, but because I finally chose me. The first text came 3 days after I left. Can we talk? I saw it when I turned my phone back on. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. Not angry, not hopeful, just numb. I didn't respond. I turned the phone back off and slid it back into the drawer. The next day, she called 4 times. Then she called Eric. She showed up at his place 2 days later, unannounced, knocking on the front door like she hadn't been the one who whispered, "Don't touch me tonight," like I was a stray animal. I watched from the window in the garage. Eric opened the door. She looked like she hadn't slept, dark circles, messy hair, that panicked tone in her voice. "Is he here?" she asked. Eric shook his head. "He's not ready to talk. You need to give him time." "I didn't mean it like that," she said, her voice cracking. "I was just tired. I didn't realize he'd actually leave." Eric didn't say much, just crossed his arms and stared. She left in tears, and for a brief second, I felt a flicker of something, not satisfaction, not victory, just clarity. She never thought I'd walk away. She thought I'd always be there, no matter how cold she got, no matter how many nights I lay next to her feeling invisible. She was wrong. I left town 2 weeks later, moved 2 states over, got a small apartment above a garage in a quiet neighborhood, took a job in logistics, not glamorous, but it paid the bills. And more importantly, nobody there knew me. I wasn't her husband. I was just Jake, the new guy who kept to himself and showed up on time. I made a rule: no contact. I blocked her number, blocked her on every platform. I didn't want to hear explanations. I didn't want apologies. I didn't want to be pulled back into a relationship where I had to beg to be seen. I'd spent too many years trying to prove my worth to a woman who'd already made up her mind. Now, I was proving it to myself. I joined a gym 2 blocks from my place. At first, I hated it. My body was out of shape. My confidence was shot. But I kept showing up, not to impress anyone, not for revenge, just to rebuild. Rebuild discipline. Rebuild routine. Rebuild me. I woke up at 6 a.m., worked out, showered, went to work, came home, read books, took walks, made food for myself. Slowly, the noise in my head started to quiet down. I became less reactive, less emotional, more centered. I didn't talk much, didn't share details about my past. People at work called me the calm guy, the one who didn't get rattled, the one who always looked like he had something on his mind, but never let it show. That used to be the opposite of me. Back then, I was always trying to fix everything. If she was upset, I'd drop everything to chase her emotions. If she was distant, I'd overcompensate with flowers, dinners, softness. I was walking on eggshells in my own marriage, trying to hold it together even while she was letting it fall apart. Now I didn't chase anything. Over time, the pain turned into distance, and distance turned into indifference. I stopped thinking about her, stopped wondering what she was doing, who she was with, what she was feeling. She became like a song you used to love, but no longer play. Not because you hate it, but because it no longer fits who you are. Almost exactly a year later, I ran into her. I was in the city for a work conference, grabbing a coffee at a small place downtown. I didn't see her at first. She saw me. I was waiting for my drink when I heard a soft voice behind me. "Jake." I turned around. She looked different. Not bad, just older. Tired. Like life had weighed heavy on her. She was wearing a beige coat, hair up, makeup faded. Her eyes lit up when I looked at her, like she was both surprised and relieved to see me. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You look—" She didn't finish, just stared. I nodded once. "Hey." She took a step closer. "I've been trying to find you for months. I didn't know if you were okay." "I'm good," I said. Simple, calm, not cold, just honest. "You look amazing," she said, almost in disbelief. "You've changed." I just smiled politely. "Yeah, I guess I have. There was this heavy pause, like she wanted to say something, maybe everything, maybe nothing. I never stopped thinking about you, she finally said. Her voice was trembling now. What I said that night, I didn't mean it. I was overwhelmed. I raised a hand gently. You don't have to explain. She blinked. I made a mistake. I nodded. We both did. She looked down, then up again, eyes glossy. Is there any chance we could talk? Just talk. I checked my watch. My coffee was ready. I grabbed it, looked her in the eyes one last time. You take care of yourself, I said. Then I turned and walked out. No anger, no bitterness, just a man who'd already said his goodbye a long time ago. That moment, as I stepped out into the sunlit street, coffee in hand, wind brushing across my jawline, I realized something. I didn't leave her to hurt her. I left to save myself. And sometimes the greatest revenge isn't shouting or slamming doors or proving you were right. Sometimes the greatest revenge is becoming the man you were meant to be, in silence, with dignity, far away from the person who made you feel small. She lost me the moment she whispered, "Don't touch me tonight." And I found myself the moment I whispered back, "Goodbye."